shoulder straps to the bra itself. And you can use almost any type of fabric to make the bra. Today we'll be using bonded lace, tricot, and a fabric called power net. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But just keep in mind that if you're using natural fibres, don't mix them with synthetics. Keep the natural fibres like cotton together, because you'll find that the natural fibres may shrink when the synthetics don't. You're also going to need the special types of clips that were used for the back fastenings of a bra. Now keep in mind the principles I've been teaching you right throughout this series. Always cut your fabric with the greatest stretch around the body. But pay particular attention when you're cutting the bra. You might find the cup sections go in a slightly different direction. So watch that you place them very, very carefully on the fabric according to the greatest stretch. By now you should be well acquainted, of course, with the multi-sized combi knit patterns that we use. When it comes to selecting the size for a bra, you really should by now know the size and the cup size that you wear. But if you find your bras aren't fitting too well, here's a little hint. A bra measurement is taken around the body, under the breast, and the cup size is then added to it. You'll find that the combi knit bra pattern only goes up to size 38. Now the reason for this is that the larger woman really requires her own particular fitting. So I suggest that if you're in the largest group, you take a well-fitting bra, one of your favourite bras, and using a piece of tracing fabric, you see what I have done there? I have pinned the tracing fabric over a bra, and take your own little pattern. And once you have marked around the actual seam line with a pen or a pencil, then when you cut, just allow yourself a little extra for the seam allowance. 6 millimetres or 1/4 of an inch would be quite sufficient. But if you're using the combi knit pattern up to size 38, you'll find the cup sizes are marked A, B, C and D. A, of course, being the smallest, B is a medium-sized, C for the large, and D for the extra large. If you're fortunate enough to be a double D, you can go slightly outside the D size and you should get a truly good fit. Once again, I've used tracing fabric rather than paper to trace off my bra pattern. And then let's look here at the actual making of a bra. Having cut out your pattern pieces, the first thing to do is to join the two cup sections together. If you like to use a lining, you can use some of the edge that you'll find on the bonded lace. And if you're using a lining, note what I have done. I have placed a piece of tricot for the lower cup on one side of the upper cup section and a piece of lining on the other side. And then I would go to the sewing machine, having pinned it, and sew through all 3 layers of fabric to join the 2 cup sections together. If you want to make a contour bra, you can use this type of fabric here, which is called fibre fill, and you can generally buy it in the furnishing departments of the larger stores. You would cut it, of course, according to the same sections as your bra pattern, and then you would merely insert it, as you can see I have done here, inside between the lining and the lower cup section, and then once again complete the attachment to the upper cup. When you sew a bra, it's a good idea to top stitch all the seams, and so having done that, the next move would be to do the top stitching. You are then ready to attach the centre front section of the bra itself. You can see that I have got the cup stitched, and now I have pinned that little front section around the edge of the cup. Once again, you would sew it. And when you sew on the machine, if you haven't got a stretch stitch machine, you could use a zigzag stitch. When you make foundation garments and swimwear, as we'll be doing later, you really do need a modern sewing machine. If you've got an old straight stitch machine, then I suggest that you would use French seams. But why not treat yourself to something new? After all, these days, modern sewing machines do so many wonderful things. And here you see the bra getting ready for its elastics. Just take a look here at the sewing machine, where I have started to pin the elastic to the bra itself. You place the picot edge down, facing the inner section of the bra, and you sew with a zigzag stitch just above the picot edge. You keep it perfectly straight until you get up to the bust line, and then you stretch it slightly till you come to the centre front. You then take another piece of elastic and go down the other side of the cup until you meet the very centre front section. And next time we meet, we're going to continue the making of a bra and actually start onto a girdle section. But today, of course, I have been working from my book on page 86. This is our book every step of the way, which follows this program. Last time we met, we were putting the elastics around the bra itself. And remember I told you that you did not stretch it across the back. The only part you stretched was slightly along the bust line. Now here is one that I've already done. The elastic has been sewn. You notice, of course, I'm using a contrast thread where you'd be using a matching thread. I do this just so you can see it more clearly on the program. Once that you've attached the elastics over the front and down the back, you turn it over to the wrong side and you top stitch it. In this case, I've used a large zigzag stitch, but it is one of the occasions when you can use one of the modern embroidery stitches on a nice new sewing machine. When you've completed the two cups, you join them together down the centre front. And finally, you attach the elastic across the bottom in exactly the same manner, but you do not stretch it at all at this point. Once you've completed that, you're ready to attach the shoulder straps, like that. And if you're in doubt as to how to attach the clips themselves, then I suggest that you keep a ready-made bra for reference when you make your very first bra. And finally, of course, you'll add the hooks and eyes to the back. I hope you have lots of fun making bras. Make them 2 or 3 at a time, because then they're not so tedious. And finally, if you want to use the underwired type of bra, all you do is sew a piece of tape across that seam around under the cup and thread your underwire inside that. And now we're going to look at the making of a girdle. Now in these modern times, it still raises a smile among men and the younger generation when they see a garment such as this. But of course, time will teach them that the mature figure, the extra large figure, the woman who's had a lot of children, or just for medical reasons, these women need the extra support. So it's to you ladies I dedicate this particular program, because it isn't difficult to make a girdle. You can make it very, very quickly. There are various types of girdles. There is this one here with what we call the little boy leg, which I do suggest the larger figure uses, or we have the more brief panty girdle, which is ideal for the younger ones to wear perhaps under their slacks or skirts. Now the main thing to learn about making a girdle is the fabric itself. So we now come to the introduction into our program of two-way stretch fabrics. This fabric is called power net, and it is used in the making of foundation garments. It's most important, as in all other knit sewing, that the greatest stretch goes around the body. In actual fact, in power net, the greatest stretch is down the length, unlike most knit fabrics. So when you cut your fabric, make sure that you fold it in that position and the waistlines are parallel to the selvage. Now, if you have a scrap of fabric and you're not sure where the selvage was, there's one test you can make. When you hold power net up to the light and you stretch it in one direction, it forms holes. When you stretch it in the other direction, it forms rectangles. And it's those rectangles that go around the body. If you forget, keep in mind you're going to build a brick wall around yourself, and you will always remember. So therefore, power net is used, a small piece of tricot for making the crotch section, and we use bonded lace for decoration and for added support where necessary. You'll notice that on your girdle pattern you have lines which are termed reinforcement lines. You can use reinforcement in a girdle wherever you feel a particular need. In the combi knit pattern we've placed them across the back and down the sides. But if you've got a bit of extra flesh anywhere that you want to support, you can put a reinforcement anywhere that you like. Now I told you it's a very simple thing to make a girdle. Let's go ahead and look at the actual pieces put together. In this one we have attached the reinforcement panels to the wrong side, and you note that I've actually attached the wrong side of the lace to the girdle itself, because later on, once that lace is sewn, let's find my scissors, we cut away the top of the girdle and we reveal the beauty of the lace inside. That will come right out and look like that. Here on the back, you'll see that I've put the reinforcement panels. You don't turn over the edges, you merely zigzag across the raw edge itself. And then we come to the stage of making the gusset section. We use tricot, you may prefer to use cotton. You place two sides of tricot against one leg panel and you sew across through all three thicknesses. And then once you have done that, you roll this up like that till it's all inside, and you bring it over until you've got all the thicknesses of your tricot together. That's a little bit tricky, but as long as you roll it up till those two edges are meeting, then you sew again through all thicknesses, and finally you pull it inside out, and here you see the crotch section attached to the inner leg section. Now it's very important, of course, when you make a girdle that you use very strong seams when you're sewing. So if you haven't got a modern machine with a stretch stitch, at least use 2 or 3 rows of straight stitch together to make sure, because there's going to be an awful lot of stretch on that girdle. And you'll find that the girdle pattern is, of course, a lot smaller than your body measurement. This is because it has to stretch out to actually give good figure control. We're going to learn more about this in our next lesson when we go on to swimwear. But when you use two-way stretch fabrics for your foundation garments, you are not just looking for the advantage of the stretch factor in itself, you are looking for it to give you that control of the figure where you need it. So here we've got to the stage when the crotch section has been done, and it's time to attach it to the leg sections itself. Now that is the way it's done, right through the inner leg, and then of course you would turn it over and sew the final seam. Then comes the time to attach the elastics. Now I showed you on the bra how we sew with the picot edge facing down into the garment, then turn it over to the wrong side and top stitch it. That is the way you finish the waistline of a girdle, and you do not stretch the elastic as you sew it on. The elastic for the legs of a girdle is wider, and it is rubberized, and that you put on by lapping it just over the raw edge and sewing it round and joining it in a circle, and make sure the rubberized edge is against the body. I hope you'll have fun making your girdles and bras, and today of course we have still been working on page 86, and we will be moving on in our very next lesson into swimwear. I look forward to seeing you again next time. Hello everyone, today we talk swimwear, and I've purposely left showing you how to make swimwear to the latter end of our knit sewing series, because the experience gained so far on your basic knit sewing is going to be invaluable to you now when you make swimwear, because judging the stretch factor of the fabric in relation to the size pattern you choose is essential. Unlike other clothes, a swimsuit to look good on you must control the figure. This means when it's fully stretched, a swimsuit should measure only 2.5 centimetres or 1 inch more than your own body measurement. Now we are going to demonstrate today on a one-piece swimsuit, a very basic type of swimsuit, because the aim is to show you the techniques. You yourselves can change the style to the most modern, trendy, tiny bikinis if you like, but the techniques I'm going to show you will be the same whether you're making children's wear, men's wear, or the simple trendy bikinis. Now, we're talking once again on two-way stretch fabrics. The most important fabric is the Lycras. Lycra stretches in 2 directions and therefore is very comfortable to wear. But that doesn't mean to say that you can't use a one-way stretch fabric for making a swimsuit, but particularly in a one-piece swimsuit, you must make quite sure that the length is correct. And therefore, making your own swimsuits is going to be a wonderful boon to the tall person, who I know finds trouble when she goes to the stores getting a bathing suit that is quite long enough for her. Before we go into further detail on the fabrics themselves, let's look at the items that you will be using in making swimwear. First, you need the special type of swimwear elastic. This has been chlorine treated so that when it is wet, it will relax and recover. This is very, very important. If you use an ordinary elastic, it's likely not to recover when you're swimming, and you're likely to use your bikini when you dive into a pool. Cups, of course, are optional. Let's have a look at these ones here. But what you must be careful when you choose the cups are that some are merely bra cups that you find in the department stores, while some are specially chlorine treated, as is the elastic, and they are the correct ones for a swimsuit. Just watch that if you use these cups, you do not put your swimsuit into the hot water of a washing machine, because they'll go hard and ungainly in shape. You need, of course, polyester thread. It is essential to use polyester thread because that is compatible with the stretch in your fabric. Of course, you need a ballpoint sewing machine needle, as we have been using in the past throughout our knit sewing. Now let's think of the pattern itself. The pattern of a swimsuit is much smaller than your body measurement. This is to allow it to stretch out and to give that body figure control. You need to know three things. You need to know your own body measurement. You need to know the measurement of the pattern itself for your particular size. Let's say you're size 12. Then you need to know what size 12 measures on your pattern. And you need to know the degree of stretch in the fabric that you're going to use. Now, ideal swimsuit fabric will stretch 20%, but of course you may not always be using ideal fabric, so therefore you've got to decide for yourself which size pattern that you are going to choose for the fabric that you are using. And don't be surprised that if you're even a size 14, you'll end up using a size 8 pattern. That can happen. Let's look at how we tell how that you choose your own right size pattern. I told you you need to know the hip measurement of your own particular size. Well, one way, of course, is to put the three pieces of a princess line together and measure across the hip. But on the Combi Knit swimsuit pattern, I've made it easy for you. I've given you a table of measurements telling you what the pattern measures at the hip line. So once you have decided that, you take your piece of two-way stretch Lycra and you place 2 pins across the width, which is the distance between of the pattern measurement, not the body. And having done that, you stretch that measurement against a tape measure and say, when that is fully stretched, is that going to measure 1 inch more than my body? If it doesn't, then you've got to go up or down the scale on your multi-size pattern till you find a pattern size that when you stretch the fabric is going to measure 1 inch more than your body. Now, this might seem a little confusing when I'm speaking to you on this program, but remember that you do have my book to guide you in step-by-step stages. You've got colour photography, and if you take it step by step, you'll find that this is not a difficult procedure. Now, once having decided the size pattern that you're going to use, you then have to know if the length is correct. And the way to do that, if you look in my book, you'll see a picture telling you where the tape measure is placed on the body, from the shoulder, down the back, between the legs, and up to the shoulder again. Once you have determined what this measurement is, you'll find on your Combi Knit swimsuit pattern there's another table of measurements giving you what we call the vertical trunk measurement. All you need to do is compare the vertical trunk measurement on the pattern with your own body measurement, and then you're ready to adjust your pattern if necessary and ensure that your length is correct. If you look here on the table, what I've done, you'll see that if you have to lengthen your pattern, there's a line along the bust and along the hip. You merely split along those lines if you want to add extra length, and you separate the pattern as I have done here until you get the length correct for your own personal measurement. And of course, if the pattern is too long for you, you would do the reverse. You would take a fold along those two lines where you see that I have pinned it. If you're unfortunate enough to have had a mastectomy operation, when you cut, if you take a look at the picture in the book, you will see where you add extra fabric to counter this problem. And of course today we have been working from page 92 and 93 in my book every step of the way. And when next we meet, we'll continue with swimwear. Hello everyone, well we're continuing to make swimwear, and of course we're using our combi knit pattern 309, which not only has the princess line and other different types of swimsuits, it has bikinis, it has menswear and it has children's wear, a very versatile pattern. Now back to actually putting our swimsuit together. Remember, we have checked the length, we know it's correct, and we know that we have cut a garment now that when stretched will measure 1 inch or 2.5 centimetres more than our body measurement. The next stage is, of course, to join the panels together. And just a little hint that when you're sewing a princess suit, or in fact any sewing at all, you always sew from the bottom up. It's particularly important in a princess line because you need to get that ease that you have to put in over the bust line and nowhere else. That, of course, goes for all sewing. You always start at the bottom and work upwards. Now, when you've got the panels together, the next thing to do is to join the shoulders. Now the seams that we use in knitwear, let's take a look here. I've done a sample one for you. Your pattern will say 3 millimetres, 1/8, or perhaps 1/4 of an inch or 6 millimetres. Really it doesn't matter if you're a little bit out, if your machine tends to sew the two edges together. But I do think on a very stretchy fabric it's a good idea to use the 1/4 inch seam with a 6 millimetre seam and then cut away later like that. You can see there's the seam that I have sewn with a stretch stitch, and then I'll trim it back. The reason for this is that on a very stretchy fabric, if you sew right on the edges, quite often it buckles as you sew. So that's just a little hint there about your sewing. Once the body of the garment has been put together, you need to join the shoulder seams. And you'll notice that the shoulder seams on a swimsuit are cut on the diagonal. This is for a very good reason. When the elastics are put in round the neck and the armhole at a later stage, you will find that you won't have so much give on a diagonal seam as you would if it was straight across. And the way to join it, of course, is to put the two edges together like that and then turn it over in that direction and sew across like that. Your shoulders are together. Now it comes the time to finish the crotch section. Now I have cut this lining of the crotch in a different fabric. You can use self fabric, and some medical people say that perhaps you should use a cotton lining. But certainly by using a second one here, you can see just what I'm about to do. I put the two crotch sections on either side of the back after I had joined the centre back seam, and then I sewed through all 3 layers of fabric to attach them together. Now it's a little more tricky when you come to attach the front of the crotch section. But if you keep in mind that you're trying to hide that seam completely, so turn it over before you start until it's in its finished position. Then having done that, you can merely turn it over like that, because really what you're trying to do is get that organised so you're going to sew that seam from the inside, and then when you have sewn it across, you turn it outside, and you see you have a very neat finish. When you've reached the stage of joining the shoulders and completing the lower section, then it comes the time to fit your swimsuit. Never wait until the elastics are attached, because really most of the work in making a swimsuit is attaching the elastics, and it would be such a nuisance to find you had to take all the elastics out again if you didn't have a good fit. So put the swimsuit on. At this stage it will not appear to be as tight as it will when the elastics go in, so allow for that. But at the same time it should be firm on the body. Now I've told you that we are working on a very basic swimsuit. Once you try that swimsuit on, you can cut it away to whatever bareness that you prefer. But don't cut it until you've marked it, because you may just cut away too much. Now in my book, you'll see on page 95 our model is wearing a swimsuit that has been cut away. You see we've put the markings there ready, and in a moment I'll just show you how that was actually performed. You see here we've marked it for a higher leg and for a cutout round the waist. Whatever modern fashion degrees, you can work by doing it in this particular manner. Now once that has been done, let's move that out of the way, you fold the swimsuit so the centre front and centre back are together. And you can see where I actually marked where I would like to raise the leg of the swimsuit. Now this means, of course, that I only marked one side, and it's going to be accurate when it's cut. Don't mark two sides and cut them separately. Make sure that your two legs are together when you cut, and there away you go, cutting up on those lines to raise the leg opening itself, like that. Now, if you have been unfortunate enough to have had a mastectomy surgery, then you will need to mark down the neckline of your swimsuit. You'll see on your pattern that you've got a line saying a surgical neckline, and of course I showed you before how you would cut it. And then when you have marked your neckline down to a point where you can wear it satisfactorily without showing scar tissue, you can then cut away the neckline to the depth that's going to look good on you. Now we come to the point of putting the elastics into the swimsuit. And as I told you, this is where most of the work is done, and therefore you must fit before you attach them. Now you've got quite used to in your knit sewing using the quarter pointing method. The first thing you do is to measure around the neckline of the swimsuit. You measure around the armholes and you measure around the leg. Now where possible, it is best that you measure on the paper pattern itself, because after all, this fabric is very, very stretchy, and merely by lifting it off the table, it can stretch. If you've cut away the legs, of course you're going to have to measure the garment itself, but make sure that you lay it on the flat surface of the table as you do your measuring, and as I've shown you before, you walk your tape around the edge of the fabric as you're doing it. Now, next time we meet, I'm going to show you how the elastics are attached. And don't forget, of course, that we have been working from my book every step of the way, and we have been working up to pages 96. I look forward to seeing you at the next lesson. Right, well, continuing our swimwear. In the last lesson, I had shown you how to measure for the neck elastics, the armhole elastics, and the leg elastics. And when you cut the elastics for the neck, you cut them 2 inches or 5 centimetres less than the neck opening. For the armholes and the legs, 2.5 centimetres or 1 inch less. Now you join the neck and the armhole elastics into circles, but at this stage, leave the leg elastic unjoined. You divide the neckline of the elastic into quarters with pins, as I've shown you in a past series, and then you locate the centre of the shoulder. Remember, we've got a diagonal line on the shoulder, so you're going to have to fold the 2 edges of the armhole together and mark the top of the shoulder with a pin on each side. You then place one of the quarter pointed pins onto the shoulder line, and the next thing to do is to pin it smooth and flat for about 5 centimetres or 2 inches over the shoulder. Having done that, you stretch it till it fits the centre back and the centre front. When it comes to the armhole, you divide your elastic into halves. You put the centre half on the shoulder line against the pin mark, and once again you pin it smooth and flat for 5 centimetres or 2 inches over the shoulder itself, and then you stretch it until it fits the side seam. Now, that little point I told you about keeping it smooth and flat over the shoulders is extremely important. The reason for that is, if you do not have that exactly identical on both the armhole and the neck edge at that point, you will find that one will stretch more than the other. and you will not have a smooth professional finish over the shoulder line. Now when you cut the elastics for the leg, as I said to you, you do not join it in a circle. You go to the sewing machine and you place that elastic inside the raw edge of the front leg. And as you sew, you do not stretch across the front leg, but you stretch it fully until it fits the back. The reason that you don't stretch it across the front is it's much more comfortable to wear if the stretch is only across the back leg. In a moment I'll show you how I actually apply the elastics on the sewing machine, but there's one little point I would like to make first. When I joined the elastic into a circle,